What up?
Nah, really?
Yeah, it's really
Ahmed,
cool.
Ahmed doesn't tell me anything. Let's do it.
How
I
cool
think
was
it's
that?
special.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Hey, I know people are just trickling in and people are waking to this news at all different times. It's ridiculously early for a Patriots uh, live stream, but if you're here, you know, and if you don't know, you're going to know soon enough. You're going to wake up to about 775,000 texts from your friends, as many of you guys did. And here it is. It happened. As was widely reported and much expected, Bill Belichick, the New England Patriots, parting ways after 24 seasons. While this has been headed this way, we're going to talk about everything. Decision to do it, how it went down, the fact that it does seem to be amicable. The two sides are going to hold a press conference later today, which we're going to attend. We'll try to bring it to you live, and we'll bring you all the reaction after. A succession plan, what they should do, what we think they will do, and then, spend some time obviously celebrating what I think, is, I hate using the term arguably. Belichick's the best football coach who's ever coached, and I don't think it's debatable in terms of what he's done in a salary cap era and his unprecedented success over this much time. I think it's stupid arguing. I think when you say arguably, you're talking about the greatest head coach in any sport, any professional American sport of all time. And if he's not number one, he's on the Mount Rushmore of that as well. And so the guy's going to get his due and he's going to get his flowers, because while this is something that I think is necessary and had to change, I don't know that it's instantly going to get better. I think it had to change. But it's still kind of a sad day for people who kind of, grew up in this era of Patriots football, Taylor, and saw all this. This was a gift given to us, and this signifies the end of that. And when things end, obviously you're going to reflect, and I think Belichick's tenure is going to be uh, that's going to be what we're going to think about almost right away, more than the failures and more than the end and more than how things went down. And that's not always the case with people. So your initial reaction now that it's just gone, like now that he's gone and now that it's happened, it's weird, right? Where it's weird waking up to a non-Bill Belichick Patriots world, as
Yeah,
you never have in your life.
I never have. I mean, this was my first year on the beat. This is crazy. It hasn't set in yet, but I covered the last year of Bill Belichick's career with the Patriots. That's just insane. I mean, I agree. Like, it needed to be done. I think in my head, I was already kind of ready for it. I would have frankly been stunned if he stayed. That would have been the real shocker to me. But still, you can never really prepare for something like this and how it feels. And, I mean, he's an incredible coach. And you saw that even, all the issues with the offense, all the issues with special teams, the defense was dominant. They lost their two best players and still finished top 10 in DVOA, which, I know, stat nerd, who cares DVOA? They were still a really good defense.
Everybody drink.
But all you had to do is watch. Like, you could see this wasn't some defense that was phoning it in. This was a well coached. Every week, if you watch Pat's Daily, and I did my behind enemy lines type segments where I would watch film with people who covered other teams, every single week people were like, man, this defense, whew. Because just how well they get to their landmarks, how disciplined they are, how well they tackle, their recognition, and the fact that when you see them, playing man coverage, zone coverage, whatever it is, they always seem to know exactly where to go. They seem to know what's coming. And that is something that players always harped on with Belichick. Jabril Peppers talked about it constantly, how well he prepared them. And, it came out in the report that the Herald had with Andrew Callahan, obviously CLNS family, and Doug Kyde, where they interviewed somebody on the staff who was like, Bill goes up in front every week and tells us exactly how we need to win. And we just aren't doing it. And the players just aren't executing. And then when he says, you do this, you'll win. And you don't do this, you'll lose. Well, we do the things he tells us not to do. And, it's pretty predictable. And it didn't matter who was going to come in here. There's going to be a drop off. You're hoping that it's kind of evened out by the defense improving, maybe better special teams or a new philosophy on special teams, and not keeping 8 or 10 guys who are only special teamers but aren't very good special teamers. Like the reality is, I've seen so many people on Twitter kind of make it seem like, oh, Belichick's done all these good things. Why would you want to let him go? I think you have to be honest with yourself. And this was a team that was in need of change. Belichick said there were a lot of things that needed to change, and he said he wanted to be a part of that. But when you have Gerard Mayo, who, it seems like it already seemed that way for the past year. I wasn't totally sure about it, whether it was, he was staying for personal reasons or whether it was that he expected to be the heir apparent. You have Gerard Mayo in waiting. Obviously, Vrabel's on the market. So you had options. And at some point, as great as Bill Belichick is, he's going to continue to coach, but you had to move on at some point. It had to happen. And you could have dragged your feet for another few years and maybe you had the same product. And then imagine how much worse that would have been if you saw minimal change, especially in the front office, where who's going to tell Bill Belichick no? He said himself, yeah, he was willing to take a step back in personnel, but he also said that somebody needed final say. That person is going to be Bill, whether you bring in Scott Pioli, whether you bring in Thomas Dimitroff, whether you bring in Adam Peters. Bill Belichick is going to be the one at the end of the day who stamps and says, yes, I approve. So there had to be some level of change. And I mean, it's going to be drastic. It's good that you have guys like Gerard Mayo and Vrabel who are at the top of the head coaching candidates list who have familiarity with the team, but also can bring their own style. I don't think anybody or nobody should be expecting, if it is Gerard Mayo, that it's going to be business as usual the way we've seen it. He is a very different person. The way he addresses media is very different. He's very transparent. The way he addresses players, you got a player's coach. I think Bill is a player's coach. I don't want to, I think that obviously players love him. You've seen Mac Wilson has been tweeting about him and Nick Saban for the past 24 hours because Nick Saban obviously retired yesterday. Players love Bill, but players also love Gerard Mayo and have a ton of respect for him. He was the leader of the defense when he played as the middle linebacker. He's accomplished. He's going to demand immediate respect and already has experience in the building. But yeah, it's just I'm kind of just spewing all my thoughts because
but it's all coming out at once, right? Because that's the thing. And like, so, I think we'll move on. I think we'll get to like, hey, what happens next? Because it's very interesting and strange and confusing and almost scary. Where they go. I tweeted this a short while ago. I'm standing by it in the sense that I know Mike Vrabel has not learned coaching under Belichick, but I believe he's learned football under Belichick. I believe he's cut from the same cloth. And that's actually a guy who's relatively young in the coaching world, with kind of an old school philosophy in terms of how he is. He's the leader of men type of guy. And not to say he's not super smart, not to say he wasn't excellent. I think he made a lot with a little in Tennessee, and they exceeded expectations based on what they had on their roster. So he was an excellent head coach in Tennessee, but it definitely gives me pause that the start of the press release when they let him go was they're looking for somebody to be a little bit more innovative and forward thinking. Now that could mean the forward thinking views of the organization where they might need to take a step back before they take a step forward, and Vrabel wanted to win now. But it also makes me think that they thought he was maybe a bit of a dinosaur there, or maybe just in terms of his thinking that it wasn't in line with the direction that they wanted to go in terms of analysis. Go ahead.
Yeah, we actually so it was described that at first it seemed like Vrabel and first year GM Rand Carthon didn't get along, and that they had butted heads. That's what reports were. Then Ian Rappaport came out yesterday and said that it was a big part of it was it's actually more about ownership than the general manager, than team leaders, because Vrabel never shot down rumors that he wanted to be back with the Patriots. Obviously, he came back after being inducted in the Patriots Hall of Fame. And he addressed the crowd during a game, and he said, "We've got a game to win." Which I was there, and I tweeted. I was like, "Whoa, that was awesome!" But also super bizarre to see a coach who leads a team in your conference use the term "we," even if he is a former player. That's pretty strange. And yeah, I guess that he didn't do anything to dispel those rumors, and ownership wasn't happy with it. So there's so many things flying around, but you can't just poo-poo something that Ian Rappaport says. So that's a pretty significant part of that as well, is that he had ties to the Patriots and made no efforts to say, yeah, no, I have no interest in going back there.
Which is fine. And so that made me think it's a fait accompli. But to kind of bring my thought full circle, Fair or not fair, personally, I truly believe that a clean break from all things Bill and a completely new system and new faces and new blood and people who don't have any ties or loyalty can sometimes be a good thing. I know the ownership. I know people want to kind of maintain the line, right? Oh,
Mhm.
the ex coach, the ex player, and there's something to be said about that. But I do think the Patriots have had such a full experience over the course of 24 years with people coming in and out as assistants and this and that of having done things one way. I would be interested for at least for them to entertain the idea of doing something totally new and different. I want that, you know, new sexy hot thing, whatever it might be. But
Mhm.
um again, I want them to at least think about it. I don't like the idea of just being entrenched in institutional thinking all times and, the Patriot way and this and that. The Patriot way was Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. That's the
Mhm.
Patriot way. Those things are gone. You have to accept that it's over, right? We are in a new era, and I think you have to embrace that. But again, not to say Mayo or Vrabel might not be great, whether it be here or somewhere else. Personally, I would like the Patriots and Robert Kraft to expand their thinking beyond that in their search. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's basically a done deal. As far as Belichick goes, going back to him, I think among the things that we talked about, you and I offline, and we've talked about, on some shows and things we've had leading up to it. Um, and I know we discussed it before. You kind of wrote your piece, which you guys can check out on CLNS Media, talking about both Bill Belichick's kind of legacy and what led to this thing and all of the missteps along the way over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. It's certainly sad, but it's I think deserved if you just look at the snapshot of those last 4 years and you can't think about the past. But what I always thought with Bill, and you have that great Bum Phillips quote that everybody talks about all the time, that he can take his in and beat your in, and you turn around and take your in and beat his in. This is what I always thought what you'll miss the most from Bill Belichick is I don't even know if you could quantify it in Vegas point spreads. I believe he gave you a touchdown end. You know what I mean? A touchdown advantage. I mean, over every team. If home field is 3, I think Belichick gave you 7. Like, I think he was his in game and the game planning that led up to things and the way that he would approach, how he would tackle an opponent and being among the first coaches that would consistently change up an entire. You have teams that can only do one thing well. Belichick had teams that could do everything well and they could change it on a dime to be able to make you play left-handed or play to your weaknesses or take away what you do best. And it seems obvious, but football's so complicated and so intricate and takes so much planning, prep, and understanding that most teams can't do that. They can't change their identity week to week, and the Patriots could. And Bill Belichick would literally. It was during this era, both era 1 and era 2, Taylor, you'd go into games with there's a few things in sports history that you knew were certain, and one of them, especially in my time as a fan, one of them was Pedro Martinez starts, and another one was Bill Belichick uh, walking on the field and absolutely under no circumstances having any chance to lose a particular game. That's a weird thing in football to know that there's no way this team can beat us. Not because there's a bunch of different things, on the team and Tom Brady and this and that, but because Belichick with there's no way that guy over there is going to come up with something that this guy over here isn't going to be able to counteract
No.
or isn't 7 moves ahead of already and has figured it out and knows what's going to happen and is and has already accounted for that, and then what you're going to do to counter that, then what you're going to do to counter that. And that's a massive on-field edge that I think is going to be the thing that they lose, and it hurts them the most.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's seen more football than anybody who's coaching right now, and that's just the bottom line. And his ability to, I know, I started watching when I started working on the top 10 piece that we're gonna drop later today of moments in Belichick's career. I was watching the "Do Your Job Well" segments, and I know Josh McDaniels was mentioning how it was just uncanny his ability to just kind of find the vibe of a game or practice and understand when to kind of turn it on and when to press guys, when to pull back, what to do in terms of just game strategy. And that's one of the biggest things is the ability to adjust in game. There are so many coaches, especially young coaches. And, as they usher in a new era, you don't know how that's going to look. But Bill's ability to understand the flow of a game, what needed to change, how to inspire and motivate his players, those are just things that not everybody has. He had those in spades. And it was an incredible thing to watch. And then you want to talk about as a talent evaluator, like, we can offense recently, yeah, kind of dropped off, but the defense, like how many guys did we see break out this year who fans basically had as afterthoughts? You think of Jelani Tavai just making plays on a consistent basis, Anthony Jennings becoming one of the most disruptive edge defenders in the league. That obviously has to do with coaching as well and position coaching. And then Belichick's, now that I'm talking about position coaching, Belichick's ability to find good position coaches who understood how to get the most out of players, even if they didn't necessarily have a background in their position or even in football. Mike Pellegrino did a phenomenal job with the cornerbacks, and he played lacrosse. Like, just Belichick was so great at finding those people who were great communicators and, effective leaders. And it's just so many qualities that some coaches have a few of these things, some coaches have a few of these things. Belichick just stacked all these positive qualities together, and it's it's
Yeah,
incredible.
he does. And I want to address a couple things. I honestly, like, one thing for sure, and I know you see it in the you're seeing some in the chat, and I know some fans feel this way. Guys, there's two separate things. You can talk about the greatness of Bill Belichick and also recognizing that he needs to move on. And honestly, I think, look, you can argue that he needed to stay, and I think it's a fair argument, because you might think what's coming is worse, and you would rather just live with a few more years of Bill and ride it out until it's dead, and then make the change. I understand that thinking. What I don't understand is thinking that, oh, you guys were critical, so you can't say something nice about him. Look, both things are true. He's the greatest of all time, but at this point, whether it's age or whether him being too entrenched in whatever it is that he's thinking, it's gotten to the team. When you're in charge of everything, you get a lot of the credit, and you know what? A fair amount of the blame. And so this 4-year, 5-year, 6-year snapshot, in the last years of Brady, even though one of them resulted in a Super Bowl, and all the way to now, is a lot of mismanagement and a lot of things, and a lot of poor decisions and poor personnel decisions and poor decisions with the coaching and reluctance to accepting outside ideas or new things, not embracing an analytics department. I'm sorry, at this point, you hate to shovel dirt on a man's grave, but Bill, some things had passed Bill by, or some things were just, he wasn't interested in even trying.
And what's Bill's own philosophy? You move on a year early rather than a year late. He says that all the time.
And so he's done it, and he's been brilliant with that. And we didn't even add that to his list of his accomplishments. Go over the list of things. And one of the reasons Bill Belichick skated is everybody was wrong about everything for 20 years. So you just assumed you were wrong now, meaning like that he knew something you didn't know, which of course he does. He knows everything we don't know. That's not really the case, but really more that like, this will probably work out because it always does. You were just used to it, but it's not the case anymore in this thing. And you're right. It's sometimes you just have to move on. Go over the history of Belichick's tenure. How many times he let somebody go and they're like, man, that was bad. First 20 years, Asante Samuel, end of list, like not a lot. And you saw guys go, Trey Flowers, JC Jackson, signing these big deals elsewhere. And you're like, yeah, they all end up back in New England. Jamie Collins, doesn't matter. Because he was getting the most out of everyone. He would elevate them to a point, and then he would recognize when it was time to go, and he was brilliant at it. And recently, that wasn't as much the case. There were some very questionable personnel decisions. The handling of Joe Tooney, as example. Obviously, the free agent signings. There's a lot of things that kind
Tom
of
Brady.
went awry. And obviously the Brady thing is at the top, so much so it's been talked about ad nauseum. It's almost not worth continuing to bring up. But and again, I think this comment is the most appropriate. GM Bill got Coach Bill fired. Everybody seems to think that that's very likely the case, and I think it is. And that's where I think people are having a tough time with the separation, Taylor, is
Mhm.
like you're losing that wizard on the sidelines who gives you that touchdown or more edge. But he no longer can take Hizen and beat Yorin because Hizen is so bad because of the teams he put together and what he thinks makes good football players nowadays that you wonder if he's just kind of lost the plot there a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if we live in a world where Tom Brady, stayed with the Patriots, got a little bit more say, and got to pick some of his own groceries, Bill never gets fired. He goes out on his own terms because then it's the defense is still he gets all the credit for that. Special teams, you're not going to get fired over special teams. But on the offense, you have Tom Brady being able to lift all ships, and then maybe he gets some of his pieces. Then everything ends just storybook ending. But that's not what happened. Instead, you had Brady leave, and then you try to fix it. Obviously, 2020 was a really weird season. I don't really like holding that against because you had so many key players that opted out due to COVID. They had a ton of cap restrictions because a lot of it had to do with Brady and the way they had to kind of work things around for his contracts. So but after that, you had the Mac Jones era, and then it looks kind of pretty good in 2021. And then obviously all the things with the head coaching staff, it's a disaster because you have an inexperienced quarterback, an inexperienced quarterback coach, and offensive coordinator, and things just kind of fell apart. And that was when you started to see. I know personally, I have always or was always a Bill we trust guy. But in 2022, you started to see, all right, these decisions that you kind of expected, they'll make sense down the road. They weren't making sense, and they were actively hurting the team. And then you get to this season where, yeah, you got Bill O'Brien, but you also have a mismatched coaching staff where you have the old regime, Bill O'Brien and a couple of his guys, and then Adrian Clem, where things never really gelled. Obviously, injuries were a massive part of the season that I don't ever want to overlook because not having not having Cole Strange and Mike Nwanu healthy to start the season, and then obviously Cole Strange having to battle through his injury throughout the season right until the very end, those were massive, massive factors in the offense's inability to really ever pick up any steam. But again, the defense played well, but there were just things that you couldn't ignore. And it didn't really seem like there was any way to fix the issues there without getting a different voice in the room and somebody else who was calling the shots up top. So, and especially with, as we mentioned, even if the offense did get better, it just didn't seem like a healthy situation among the coaches, especially when they were clashing with the front office. So, it stinks to say, but I do think we need to look at the entire picture here. And that, yes, Bill, the coach, was doing a phenomenal job preparing his team, motivating them, and getting them to the offense to sometimes punch above their weight and the defense to keep them in games that they had probably no business really being in. But at the same time, the talent deficiency on offense, it wasn't just this year, it wasn't just last year, it was all the way going back to Brady's last season. It wasn't the reason that Brady left, but it was a contributing factor. And even when they tried to fix it with the N'Keal Harry and the Mohamed Sanu, obviously those ended up being disasters. So we have to be honest in our evaluation of why this happened, but we can also acknowledge that Bill Belichick had the greatest run for any coach in sports history, put New England on the map in the sports world, and just did so many things for not only the sports world but for the community. All the joy that he was able to bring to people with his victories, and with all the things that he did in New England. So, I just want to say
Yeah.
that I think it's important to look at the big picture.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, not to get like super like misty and romantic about it. Like one of the things a lot of people love about sports is not just the excitement that it brings when you're watching games. It's, bringing people together. And it
Mhm.
really is the one thing in society where it doesn't matter where people, of all races, all up and down the socioeconomic scale, all have this common interest and this common bond, and they're united in it. And whether you're at the game or at home, there's millions of people just like you feeling what you're feeling, watching what you're watching, and doing what you're doing. And you have no, I think people underestimate what it was like for 20 something years to wake up with your chest puffed out, knowing that, like, yeah, we're the best,
Yeah.
and to have it for that long, again, the whole Boston run, I think, is really insane. But this span of time, and Belichick and the Patriots, Belichick and Brady launched it all with the 2001 Super Bowl. And for those of us in this age bracket, we went through darkness. We went through a 15-year period of darkness. If you were a kid in the late 80s, you got a taste and you're like, oh, cool, Larry Bird. And then it went dark. And my formative years in my teens and 20s, watching these teams was, wow, everybody in Boston is bad. And Bill Belichick did what people thought was the impossible. And we'd seen token Super Bowl appearances, okay, as well. And it felt like 2001 might have been another, upstart guys, that's fun. And they're going to lose by 40, and then you'll never hear from them again. And it wasn't. It was the beginning, and we didn't know it then. We didn't know it. And I always say this happens a lot in sports too. What at the time feels like a monstrous upset, you actually realize was the beginning of something. You just didn't know what it was. And that's what 2001 was. It was the beginning. Was it a big upset in retrospect, looking at the Patriots and Rams? Maybe a little, but honestly, the Patriots were much, much, much better and had so many good players on that team. And then you had Belichick's just incredible game plan that was able to hold the greatest show on turf at bay, and he got one for us. Okay, as fans, he got one, and that meant everything. And as much as you want to talk about, it was Brady and Brady carried him and this and that, no, Bill won that Super Bowl, and it was amazing for the fans and for everything, and then everything that followed since there. So again, it is. I think it gets lost a little bit in the now. What an impact it had. So I agree with you 100%. Taylor, we're going to move on to kind of next stuff. We'll keep talking about Bill and his legacy, and more people are kind of flooding in
Can I
here.
say one thing real quick, because I kind of just thought of it, is that you mentioned it. I do want to say, not make it about me, but quite honestly, Bill Belichick changed my life. Yeah. I didn't like sports at all. I was kind of just a kid who my mom threw me into a bunch of different stuff, and I didn't really know what I liked or anything. I went to boarding school. If you're familiar with Fessenden, I went there for middle school and kind of got more familiar with the sports world and started watching the Patriots and was like, this is pretty fun. Maybe sports aren't so bad. And now I'm here. I got into sports. I started, really getting into trying to study the game. I don't think I would have the amount of knowledge and the passion for football that I do without watching Bill, because it wasn't just about the winning and all of that, because I started really paying attention to the team in 2010 and 2011. Obviously they were good, but they ended on heartbreak. I think I cried after the 2011 Super Bowl loss, when I was just kind of just getting on board. But being able to watch how he was able to hold all these great offenses where you're going into games and ESPN is previewing, Peyton Manning and all these offenses are juggernauts. And then you see Bill Belichick hold them down. And in my head, I'm like, how is he doing this? And that's how I really got into football strategy and wanting to study the X's and O's. And then it turned into, get more opportunities to write, which I didn't know I ever even wanted to be a writer or cover anything in any news capacity. And, I started studying this team, and now I'm here. And, thank you, obviously, for the opportunity. I got to actually talk to Bill and study his press conferences, obviously, for years, which prepared me this year to not go in there and make a fool of myself. But, I just wanted to say, man, Bill literally changed my entire life. I wouldn't be here without him. I don't know what I'd be doing if it weren't for him. So,
I think a lot of people's lives, Taylor, and I know, for someone, younger people who were inspired to do this, as a professional choice like yourself, there's quite a few. You can look around the beat and kind of be like, yeah, there's probably a lot of these guys in here. I think he did it for a lot of people. And so I think it doesn't matter whether it inspired you to get into it. I will also say that Bill Belichick and the Patriots ushered in an unprecedented era of sports passion in the region. Yes, it's always been a sports town, but let's not, and it always has and it always will, but it became the thing about this area for 20 something years, and every other teams had helped along the way as well, but the Patriots were the constant throughout all of it. People come and go, and the later things get, there's so many different types of options. And obviously, with the advent of social media over the last 15 years and how things have changed and all the things that you can do with your time and watch and this and that, and people don't even watch sports anymore. They watch highlights. They watch the Patriots. You got it Sunday and you watched it because you were guaranteed to see something special or something dominant, and you knew you were on a march to something great. And the Patriots were that line all the way through 2001, all the way through till up until recently, that included 3 Red Sox titles, 1 Celtics title, 4 Red Sox titles, 1 Celtics title, 1 Bruins title, and countless other finals and championship appearances from those teams. Really, really amazing stuff here. And I think all of us working in this business, who knows what direction it goes if you don't have this much interest and this much opportunity and this many jobs and this sort of thing. If you're just working in some middling sports town, one horse town or one team town, there's not as much pie to go around. As a guy who loves pie, there was plenty of pie to go around here. So we will definitely I think everyone is kind of grateful for this opportunity to get to do what we've done and see the things I've seen. I've seen 5, 6 Super Bowls, 7 Super Bowls, Taylor. Losses too. That's freaking amazing. That's never going to change. That's there forever. And I think that's that way for a lot of us. We'll continue on again, a little bit of the love fest and a little bit about what's next for sure. And we'll hang in here with you guys as you kind of continue to flood in, learning what's happened here this morning. The Patriots and Bill Belichick parted ways after 24 seasons. We're going to probably chat with you for, another 20 or so minutes. Taylor has a lot to do, and I know his mind is spinning towards that. The Patriots, as we said, do have a press conference, joint press conference. So again, they're on good terms. There seems to be no compensation. Bill seems to be free to go where he wants to go. Regardless of his contract, we'll see what that decision is. He can not coach and collect a big fat check next year if he wants, or he can dive in to one of the 7 vacancies right now. And you wonder if there's another team out there that thinks Bill is their guy, whether there's 8 or 9 vacancies by the time this day is over, if they think they've got a shot at the GOAT. And you never know how that's going to go. Real quick, we want to tell you guys about our sponsor here at CLNS Media, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network, and the official partner of the NFL. The playoffs are getting underway. If you haven't signed up and you want to get in on the action, a terrific chance to cash in on a super bonus that's really easy. You don't have to do anything other than deposit 10, bet 5, and you get 150 in bonus bets. It's not real money, but it's in your account and you can bet with it and make real money with it. So it's just a gift. All you have to do is make that first $5 wager, and then you got 150 to play with. Hey, try some crazy parlay. See if you can get rich, Visit fanduel.com/Boston. Again, bet 5, 150 in bonus bets. Restrictions do apply. Make sure you check out the website. Once again, fanduel.com/Boston. Make sure you check that out. Let's circle back once again. As we said, there is a press conference coming up later today, which these guys are going to head over to. And it is because of this. Bill Belichick is gone with the Patriots after 24 seasons. Now, Taylor, I'll ask quick before we get on to succession plans. I always thought this was the route, amicable. Like, people theorize lots of things, right? Bill throws a tantrum. Bill quits before he can get fired. Bill puts his foot down and says, you're going to, blah, 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 this and that. Bill poo-poos any chance of a trade. And there were other people who thought, well, the Crafts are going to hold out. They got to get a trade, worrying about what that compensation would be. Is he worth the first? Is he worth the second? Sometimes the easiest solution and the one with the least amount of people crapped all over the Titans for thinking it was too hard to work out compensation with Vrabel. I didn't think that was that crazy. You've got to fill you got to fill your job, and there's 7 vacancies out there. You're going to wait a week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks when every top candidate is gone to hopefully get a draft pick if somebody wants your guy. That's crazy. Like, unless it comes together fast, these things are complicated. And I always thought that wasn't going to happen. I thought it was almost cheap to think that you're going to trade Bill after 24 years. I don't think Bill wanted his value attached to a draft return. I don't think Bill would want to be known as the guy who was traded for the Cole Strange equivalent that they end up drafting with whatever pick that they get. No disrespect to Cole Strange. I just think they wanted to just, hey, you've done right by us. We've done right by you. What do you want to have happen? We want to move on. Well, how do you want it to go? And they gave him his option, and he said, just release me from it and I'll figure it out. And that's, I think, what happened here. And there we go. Are you surprised or upset that there wasn't some sort of compensation here when you do have the asset, the greatest coach of all time under contract? Letting him walk, I know with some people might sit a little bit funny, thinking like, they should have gotten something out of that.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. One, realistically, would Bill also want to give up high draft capital to whatever team he's going to?
Yeah, that's
you have
another
to think about
one.
that as well. That's no, probably not. And I think that's one of the biggest ones. And I think if you did add that to the equation, it turns this amicable parting of ways into something that turns
and that's
a
how
little
coach
bit.
trades work. That's a
Mhm.
the coach has to say, I'll go there. It's not like
Right.
players that you ship them. They've got to agree. All you're doing is saying, I will free him for this contract, and then later you're going to send me something. But it's basically it's letting somebody seek out their own job and then working out some sort of compensation after. But he's got to want it. The Patriots did not hold as many cards in this regard as people think, that they could just ship him. And so there's a lot of reasons. The one you just mentioned also being another huge one. Why would Bill say trade me for 2 firsts and then go somewhere else and not have in a, if you're a team looking for a head coach, chances are you need every draft pick you can possibly get. So
Exactly.
it's you're kneecapping yourself right out of the gate. It does not make sense.
Yeah, that and this isn't the situation with the Jets where he was traded to the Patriots from the Jets, but he had no legacy. I mean, obviously he coached with the Jets, but he wasn't Bill Belichick yet. So that trade made a little more sense. But with someone with his legacy, also, I made a joke about the whole wanting to move on from Vrabel and not really spend the time it would take to find a trade candidate. I made fun of it just because it was an easy joke, but realistically, that makes total sense. And you do want to move on quickly. We don't really know for sure what their succession plan is. If it's going to be Mayo, if it's going to be Vrabel, if it's going to be Brian Flores, for all we know. But I do think this is something you kind of want to like make your decision, start moving on, and not just make it messy. And I agree with your point also that if you do end up trading Bill for a pick, it does get associated with whoever's taken. Obviously that could be, oh, we got a new face of the franchise and the person who ushers us into a new era. Or it could be, a pick that's totally blown, and then it just looks really bad for it either looks bad for the organization or for Bill. And yeah, I just agree. I don't think that trading was ever really a possibility. It sounds great as a fan because you want as much draft capital as possible in what's pretty much a rebuild. But yeah, I don't think that was ever really on the table.
Yeah, likely not. So again, moving on to the succession, here's another thing. Look, I made my, you know, case, so to speak, about a new voices. I at least want to be open to them. I don't like the idea of just being, but I believe it's very likely that it's going to be. I think it's a two-horse race, and one might be so far ahead right now that it's really one person.
Yep.
And that's Gerard Mayo. I know Vrabel is also a strong possibility, but between those two, that seems likely where we're headed. Whether this ends up being a great hire or not, there are reports, and I think even just people openly talking about how much people love Gerard Mayo in the room, leader of men. And as I've mentioned, I was fortunate enough to get to know Gerard a little bit when I was working over at NBC, and he was doing football programming with us after his playing days were over. And just one of the smartest, funniest, most engaging guys, magnetic personality, walks in a room and everybody wants to be around him. Smile on his face for everyone, treats everybody with respect, knows your name, looks you in the eye, shares stories, holds court, and everybody just sits there and wants to listen to it. So even the teeny taste I've gotten in my time or my year or so working with him, I can say there's a lot of reasons to like the vibe that Gerard Mayo puts out. What translates on the field in terms of strategy, who you hire, being able to run a whole football team, that's a daunting task for someone who's never done it before. So there's some risk involved there. But I like the idea of not necessarily I definitely don't want some 70-year-old retread coach who's done it, who's on his fourth job, like just for the sake of doing it. So there's that for sure as a potential thing. Among whether the choice is right or not, another thing I don't love is Bill Belichick is not being let go because of his coaching, and we're worried about who's succeeding him as coach. The real issue is who's making personnel decisions, which if they had gone differently over the last few years, if you had taken Debo over Nikhil and Pickens over Thornton and not taken Cole Strange and not, traded around the board and not drafted special teams as early and built a little bit more depth in a bench, this might have been a 9 or 10 win team this year. We're not even entertaining Bill. We're talking about where you go next. I don't know how that would necessarily go. The personnel is the issue. I do not love putting a coach in place and then looking around and be like, anyone want to work with this guy? I find it backwards. And I know that's how it works. It's hard to get the GM in here and then have them do a round of coach interviews. The timing is weird, but this is one of the weird things when you have a guy who is both, right?
Mhm.
Like when they're both, it's hard to replace the GM and do it first at a time when you're also looking for a head coach. But that's the situation they're in here, and they're kind of taking what I think is the easy route, which is, yeah, I already got the guy in a building. I've got what I need right here. That's good. Come on in and do it. It's a big part of your organizational philosophy as a person who's running the team, Taylor. Your coach has to jive with it, and now you're taking that choice away from them, and I think you're kneecapping your opportunity to get somebody.
Yeah, I mean, if it is Gerard Mayo, I think with Gerard and Vrabel, I think that's the smoothest course to maybe finding that general manager. Like with Vrabel, it was reported that it's not that they are handcuffed together, he and Adam Peters, but they do have both ties to the Patriots. So I'm not sure if he would still go with Mayo as well. But with Mayo, I still think that, when I asked him a few weeks ago about how does your experience outside of football kind of help you as a leader and as a potential head coach, and he mentioned how he's able to, communicate with people of all different types of backgrounds and all these things. And obviously you have experience with them. So I agree that it is kind of funky when you have to get your coach and then you have to get the general manager. But I do feel like if there's anybody who would be able to find someone and really understand what would be a healthy relationship and someone they could really work with, I do think that Mayo is probably one of those guys just because of that outside ability. And then, like I said, with Vrabel, it seemed like he and Adam Peters might end up being a package deal just because of their shared history with the Patriots, and that Adam Peters is probably going to need a head coach. And Mike Vrabel might, I think he does want some level of say in the personnel decisions. But if he and Adam Peters are on the same page, that could potentially work. So, yeah,
I know, but
I still have to do my dive in the yeah.
but you're entrusting this is the most important draft since Bledsoe. Like it's you are in a position you never find yourself in. And you could debate Drew Bledsoe's career, but at that point, that was a home run pick to put the Patriots back on the map. You don't get that one right. If you had the guy again, it was Bledsoe or Rick Mirer, and they were considered to be neck and neck for the 1 and the 2. You pick wrong, you pick Mirer. There's no next, maybe. You don't know where you go from there. Bledsoe put New England back on the map after being absolute bottom feeders. In the kind of early 90s sort of situation, gets them back to a Super Bowl, gets you Parcells, which gets you which eventually gets you to Carroll, gets you to Belichick, and then gets you to where you are here. But you have no idea the direction the franchise goes. You're talking about, at the minimum, this pick alters the course. This pick in this draft and this offseason alters the trajectory of the franchise for a minimum 3-4 years and possibly longer. So it is the most important thing the franchise has done in decades. And it's weird to think like, I'll get to that part later. But that's the odd part to me is you see these teams already out there and your reports of like reached out to this assistant GM candidate and this personnel guy and this guy for interviews. There's teams looking for executives too. Don't you kind of have to get involved here fast and then make sure that those people are cool with Gerard?
No, absolutely. But I think there's also, there's a lot of teams that are in this position. Again, it is awkward, but this is kind of the position they're in. At least they do have their head coach, and they have somebody who, like you mentioned yourself, where the defense wasn't the problem here. And I think the best thing to do is to try to carry over as much from the defense as possible. You don't know if the Belichicks are going to leave the staff. So, I understand what you're saying, and that, you want to have that person with a vision for how the team is going to go from here on out. But as I mentioned on our post-game show last week, I don't think this is so bad of a roster where you legitimately have to just completely uproot everything. Like, the defense is good. The offense has pieces. You need to add like 3 or 4 starters where you say, okay, I'm comfortable with these guys really pushing us into a new era. And with the draft capital they have, and the money they have, they're in position to do it. So I agree. I'm also looking at Albert Breer. He had a list of hot names for potentially filling a general manager spot. A lot of them have Patriots ties. You have Mark Borgonzi, who I pronounced that well, the assistant general manager for the Chiefs. He was with the Chiefs back in 2009 with Scott Pioli, so he's got some Patriots ties. Trey Brown, he has ties to Gerard Mayo as well. He's currently the senior personnel executive for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a name to watch. Obviously, as we mentioned, Adam Peters. Jim Nagy, who's the executive director for the Senior Bowl. Now, I'm not sure if he's going to want to leave. That's a bit of a stretch. But he's on the list, so he's someone who could also watch because he used to be a scout for the Patriots. So, also Elliot Wolf, the director of scouting for the Patriots. We don't know if maybe, he takes a bigger role. So It's not a great position to be in, but it's also great that the Patriots have a pipeline. Their coaching pipeline isn't great, but their scouting pipeline is pretty fantastic. A lot of guys who've had success in the league and built great teams. As I said, the Bengals, Chiefs, and 49ers. You have guys with Patriots ties who are all looking to become general managers. So not the best position in the world to, in your perspective and as you said, it kind of worked backwards, but it's not like they have to go out and get completely fresh blood. And with the Crafts, we know they like to keep things in-house. They like to, have some level of continuity with people they've worked with before. Yep. I do think they're in a decent position.
Let me ask you this. This is another thing I think was intended to provide stability and assurance and to keep, what was that face for?
Somebody, Mr. Jason Martin, first-year reporter, feeling on the roster. I've been covering this team for a lot longer than that, friend. I've been studying this team for a lot longer than that, so know your role.
Taylor's the Doogie Howser of the Patriots beat, okay? And again, I'm dating myself with that reference, but he's got a PhD, my friends. So don't worry about this. This is the wrong man to go toe-to-toe with over particulars, I'll tell you that. Mm-hmm. Here's another thing I'm going to say about the Mayo situation, a potential landmine Robert Kraft created for himself. It was designed, both the O'Brien and the Mayo kind of call them promotions or, kind of installing them into prominent positions on this team, where it's kind of a pushback from Kraft to Bill on, dude, we can't keep doing this no OC thing. And you gotta elevate people within the organization that we want to keep here. We're going to lose these guys. The brain drain is significant. And you felt it this year. And again, Andrew Callahan and Doug Kyde and the Herald detailed some of the behind the scenes stuff with the coaching staffs about, maybe guys not necessarily doing what they need to do or the wrong positions. And obviously it all came to a head the year before with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, totally out of their depth, trying to run an offense and coach up a second-year quarterback. And I think that, as you wrote in your piece, was probably the biggest thing that kind of got you to here, where you went from semi-competitive to the third worst team in the entire NFL. That was hard to do, and that's how they got there. So the idea was, I just don't want to lose any more of these guys. So let's bring in a qualified outside guy rather than like your second string, tight ends coach, as the OC. And let's give Gerard some assurances that he means something to us and he's here. And in fact, he basically was anointed without a position as Bill Belichick's successor, walking around the building, before, forget the corpse being cold. The guy's still alive and he's sitting there, and Bill knows he's about to, this is the guy who's taken my job. Bill doesn't really give him any extra power. He doesn't make him DC. Gerard Mayo's title remained linebackers coach, despite Robert Kraft kind of saying, this is kind of the successor, the succession plan. And I believe Kraft did it for two reasons. The stability one, but the second one was when Bill is finally done, and the assumption was always Bill's going to eventually just decide, I'm going to move on. When the record's broken and he decides he doesn't want to do this anymore, he just hands the keys over to this guy and we have continuity. But now you have continuity whether you want it or not, or worse, you have a situation where if you changed your thinking over the course of the last 12 months and you don't know if Mayo's the guy and you don't want him to lead this post train wreck Bill experience, and say you do, you're like, oh man, I never thought Vrabel was going to be available, and that's the guy I want. How do you bring him in here at this point? Is Gerard gonna be like, yeah, cool, I'll be DC under this guy? No freaking way. And no. Again, how many players might you lose with that who have determined that, like, I like this guy and I would play for this guy, and you bring in some other dude, even if they like and respect him as well, that's going to be a little weird. So you've set yourself up for a position where you almost have to give it to Mayo or have to completely wipe it out, And so I don't know. It's going to be messy. It's a messy situation. Yeah.
My only real hesitation with Mayo was The inexperience, obviously, especially when Vrabel is on the market. It's one thing if you're saying, okay, you want to retain someone who has experience with the team. Where Gerard Mayo, it's like, yes, it's him. You kind of just deal with it if he is inexperienced. When it was Vrabel, I was on record as kind of taking a step back and being like, okay, especially if he's handcuffed with Adam Peters. That kind of seems like a no-brainer. He was a coach of the year 2 years ago. Obviously had success when he had a decent roster, turned Ryan Tannehill into a Pro Bowler. He has a track record. But at the same time, Mayo has been a hot head coach candidate for years. And if you think the inexperience, that's just part of it. At some point, the guy's got to get an opportunity. At some point, somebody had to give Bill Belichick an opportunity. So I understand that there's a lot of question marks, but at the same time, I do think it's great that you have somebody who can see how Belichick ran things and take all the things that were successful, which I think he'll do, and then put his own spin on it. Where, you had Trent Brown. I had Dakota Randall on a couple of days ago, and he talked about how Trent was pissed off because he heard from coaches that they were devising ways to basically screw with him, because they wanted to see what his commitment was. And there was also the issue of scheduling, where the Patriots keep you on your toes, and sometimes you don't get your schedule till the day before. Same thing with media, which is maddening, where we don't know what time we're supposed to be going in until 8 o'clock the night before. And sometimes it makes sense, but then Trent Brown made the fair point of, okay, but when it's the bye week and I want to spend time with my family, you're forcing me to buy these tickets and things, whether they're the most expensive, last minute. That's not cool. Now you have somebody in charge, whether it's Mayo or whether it's a Vrabel, where they can toe that line, where they have been in the player's shoes in a Patriots system, where they know, hey, this worked. And, after, now that I'm a coach, I understand what Bill was thinking, as opposed to, yeah, no, that was jacked up. I don't agree. I don't think that was okay. And you get that fresh perspective. So I frankly, I'm excited. I don't want them to completely gut this team and act like Bill was never here. I don't think that's how you win, because as we keep saying, Bill, the coach, was not the problem. Bill, the GM, was the problem.
It's not.
We're going to see how they handle the general manager situation. But I think it's really exciting to potentially get a guy who has both perspectives of not having with Mayo having worked and played for Bill, but with Vrabel having played for Bill and had success as a coach elsewhere.
You're not wrong at all about any of it. It's just, if you stay in-house, chances are you're going to keep, is Mayo going to fire the entire staff and bring in his own guys? Does he have the cachet to have guys? You haven't coached with other people. You haven't coached with other people before. What kind of staff can he assemble? What I don't want is 70% of it is coming back, maybe 80 with a couple of other things. That's the same team with a worse head coach. That's not great. And we're not saying, and again, it's not a knock on Mayo, but again, what happened was, this is Bill's this is how he did it. Everything Bill Belichick did that made him successful is also what he's done that's kind of led him to this point. And you and I have talked about this a bit, in the weeks, months leading up here. Consistently building up and training your own people and rising them up to a level of prominence where they can move on and get other NFL jobs is great. And I know Bill didn't want to hire the hot, OC or DC from somewhere, just knowing that those guys want to go out and get head coaching jobs somewhere else. And it's one of the reasons why he made you earn that title and want to stick around here. And he doesn't like constantly changing things up. So he'd rather just have a program. Bill very much views this as a college program, talking about the Patriots. And honestly, it's one of the reasons a lot of teams and a lot of new head coaches fail in their first stops is they don't have enough time to build their program. But right now, because of that, you lost your top tier and your second tier guys and are putting guys who played minimally on the other side of the ball in charge of other positions. It really is across the board, not to call out names, but it really needs I think a fairly significant overhaul on the assistants. On top of that, the Patriots operate, and especially you lose, Ross Douglas during the year as well. Patriots operated with far fewer assistants. I forget what the number is, but it's 16, 17, and the Niners, for example, have 29. They have fewer guys doing it. You have some guys doubling up. Matt Patricia was technically an O-line coach last year and the offensive coordinator. And he's like, what are you guys doing? Okay, how about you guys? Are you guys good? And you've got position players basically running their own units and their own teams and things like that. None of that is good. So you have to be able to come in and build something. from scratch. And again, maybe Mayo does. Maybe Mayo is such a liked guy that he's got 100 people who are coming in. But do a lot of people with experience want to work on the staff of a less experienced guy? I don't know. It's a little tricky there.
But I think, I mean, you also have to assume that Mayo has already thought about this for years. Again, he was taking, I think it was 2 years ago, he interviewed with the Broncos. Like, I'm sure he has some people where he understood if he was ever in this position, especially if he did know that he basically was going to be the head coach after Bill.
He's got to
Probably
have
has
a
some
plan.
people in his
Yeah.
circle who he's exactly. And on top of that, you
But
also have Bill
there's
O'Brien. If he doesn't get rid
so
of Bill
many
O'Brien,
vacancies. That's the thing. Is like 7 vacancies, and a bunch of people are going to be moving around here. It's going to be a massive grab and go. It's like an Easter egg hunt. You throw them all out there and say go. Everyone's going to be scrambling to get that. So that's a challenge too. But you're right. He's definitely thought about it.
yeah, and if the Crowds are going to put him in this position, I think one just out of fairness, so like if he wasn't ready, I don't think they would make him that coach. And if he didn't come to them and say, "Hey, I've got some guys that I really like," and I'm sure they have to do their interviews anyway. They have to make sure that they have to abide by the Rooney Rule. I absolutely hate. But they're going to have to interview candidates, and if they start looking at other people, even if they do really like Gerard, and they realize, oh God, maybe he isn't quite ready because he doesn't have a staff in place, or what have you, I'm sure that'll be part of the decision making, and then that's where Mike Vrabel comes in, and then it's okay. Well, he does have experience. He has people he's worked with. He probably has people he can bring with him. But that's so much speculation because we literally will not have any idea about any of that. Obviously, like Arthur Smith is on the market for Vrabel in terms of if he wants to gut the Patriots coaching staff, they have that. But I'm sure that whoever the head coach is, they will have people in mind and people on call to bring with them.
Yeah. Does
otherwise it's just negligence on the Crafts part, and I don't think they run that way because if there's one thing the Crafts have done pretty well, it's find head coaches. They went from Bill Parcells to Pete Carroll to Bill Belichick. That's a pretty damn good track record.
Pete Carroll's resume looked better after the fact. His time here was a little bit stumbling and bumbling with the Patriots, and he got whacked after an 8-8 season, so it wasn't like it was a total fail. But they didn't like
it was good instinct.
They didn't like the way he was. They didn't like the direction he was taking things, and he might have. It's amazing though, his enthusiasm and his success that he's had after. Pete Carroll's going to go down as both one of the better NFL coaches, certainly of this era, and also one of the greatest college coaches of all time. He's had a remarkable career since he left here. He might have been, and this was also his second head coaching gig. But it really. It wasn't perfect then, but you're right. That line of coaches is insane when you look at it now, and the resume that they have is really incredible.
And in fairness to Pete, he was a little ahead of his time. Like the whole Seattle Legion of Boom thing, he had been doing that at USC. And like that was something that he had believed in for a long time. He just finally had the pieces to do it. And a lot of the time with head coaches, especially if you're not like a Bill Belichick where you get to pick who's on your team, sometimes you just don't have the supporting cast to do what you want to do. I was I even alive when Pete Carroll was head coach of the Patriots? I don't know. But, clearly he had something cooking. But yeah, the track record in hindsight is insane.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to go back to something that you talked about. If Mayo appears to be the leading candidate, another name that was floated and has been floated and is gaining a little bit of traction here on Twitter as people are talking about guys I'll talk to is also Brian Flores, which would be interesting. And again, another person with Patriots ties, learned under Bill, head coaching experience. Defense was phenomenal when he was here. Obviously a successful stint in Miami, but just didn't get along with his bosses. Probably deserved yeah, and Tua wasn't on board. And, look, there's reasons why that ended the way it did, and it didn't end well, but he did a good job there. And he was an instant leader of men also and had a good vision, even though if it didn't necessarily jive with what ownership was trying to do at the time. And you know what? He wasn't wrong. This is almost a Vrabel situation of what got him whacked is, they want to do something else. And, there's a push and pull between that. Flores was right. Tua did not give them the best chance to win that year, and he was forced to play him because the organization was looking ahead, not to can we make the playoffs and lose in the first round this year. That wasn't as important to them as developing the asset. And something's to be said for that is sometimes okay, the coach wants to win right now, and that's always going to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
But to tell them that, like, it actually doesn't matter. We're taking the long view. We want to be good for years, not just now. And if you stunt this guy's growth by jerking him around and pulling him out and putting this, shaggy 40-year-old dude in there in place of him, like, fine, maybe you're like 10% better on the field, but that could hurt us for years. So I understand that as well.
Yeah.
But Flores is a name. The reason I brought that up because I wanted you to address Flores' potential candidacy and whether or not you think he is, an interesting candidate for you. But second, you'd been a Mayo guy all along, and then you did a podcast yesterday, and you came out of it and kind of flipped and said, you know what? Yeah, I think it was with Dakota Randall and from Nesson, who also had an excellent piece recently about Trent Brown. But Dakota sold you on Vrabel. Where are you now? Because I'm not going to call you impulsive, but you do jump around a little bit because you know why? Because you're excitable, because you have a positive attitude, and you can be convinced why to like things, and I think he convinced you why to like Vrabel, not necessarily to prefer him, but he did sell you on the merits of Vrabel as a coach.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a lot going on in that. So part of it, and also I want to mention with Flores before I forget, he also turned that Vikings defense around. That Vikings defense was horrendous 2 years ago, and last year, and he made them a respectable unit that was legitimately competitive, one of the NFL's best defenses. So I want to throw that out there. But the reason I kind of did a bit of a step back on Mayo was one, Dakota did mention how Greg Bedard talked about, and we don't know this for a fact, but he did say that people thought that Gerard Mayo wasn't ready. And when you compare that with the whole thing with the reports on Adam Peters and Vrabel and Peters maybe coming together, that was like, okay, my only hesitation with Mayo is if he truly isn't ready. If they think he's ready, then yeah, I know it's his first year as a head coach, but he's got to have a first year as a head coach to become a head coach. So that was where I was hesitant. But if the Crafts are saying and reports are coming out that Mayo's at the top of the list for them, then yeah, now because we didn't have that confirmation. We know that Gerard Mayo is in waiting, but the most recent news that we had was Bedard's report that people didn't think he was ready to become a head coach. So
I believe that came from coach. I believe that came from coaches, not players. That's my belief. And that also could be some people are like, this guy's walking around like he's the anointed one and he's just a position coach, and I think I'm going to fault Belichick a little bit for that without giving him true power and authority that was commensurate with, basically the way he was viewed by ownership in the organization. I don't think Bill let him kind of lead. And so I think totally fair. I just wanted to interject that. So that's my take on where that came from. I'm not going to call it a straight up hit piece, but I do understand why some people might have been put off by it. I don't know whether it means that's an accurate representation of how Mayo is actually viewed and whether or not he is capable. Right. I believe it's some people's opinion because their interest might have run in conflict with his. That's just my take.
Right. And then, I mean, yes, it seemed like I was being a little fickle and wishy-washy, but really I can only go on the information that I have. And also, I don't want to be the guy who's dragging his feet in a take, even though I have new information. So it was the combination of, being reminded that there was talk about Mayo being inexperienced and nothing really after that from anybody else, on top of if you can get Vrabel and Adam Peters, that's a pretty clear vision for the future. I do like that. But again, if the Crafts are saying, hey, we want Mayo, clearly he must have presented or will be presenting them a plan, hopefully, that gives them confidence to hire him. If he's the head coach, I'm all for it. Because again, I think that you do want to keep a lot of the culture and a lot of the, especially defensive philosophies and, the knowledge of everything that goes on there, because they did really well. And if this was a championship level offense, the defense would have done its job and they would have been really good in the playoffs, I think, as well. So, yeah, I understand it seemed like a pretty aggressive about face. But now if Mayo does have the support, then I'm all for him because I really do think that he's put in the time. I think you do want to have that level of continuity. And also, like I said earlier, it's not just, Bill Jr. He's a completely different person. He talks different. He acts differently. Mark Daniels had a piece this morning talking about Gerard Mayo's relationships with players where He said Christian Barmore made fun of Mayo's hairline and the fact he's going bald. And then Mayo comes back, how are you big and fat and you have skinny legs? Like, just like being able to, and obviously with your experience from him, like Mayo's is a people person. So, I'm excited about that. The idea that you can keep the discipline and all the good things about the Patriots culture, but also bring things that I think people have wanted for a while where there's I'm not saying that Bill was like inhumane. I think that Bill was a better human being than people will ever give him credit for, but he also was still Bill Belichick, and I think it'd be really cool to get somebody else.
Mayo's actually also brilliant. Like there's a lot of people and actually not like football smart, like he's a brilliant dude. Like there's people say this about players and ex-players and this and that, like, oh, they could do anything. I don't know that that's always the case, but with Mayo I think it absolutely is, and he proved it. He could just go and learn how to do anything. If he wanted to start a new career tomorrow on something he'd never even thought about doing, in a year he'd be successful at it. That's the kind of guy he is. That's the kind of guy he is. He really is. So there's something to be said for that, like just having, the smartest guy in the room. But again, anybody who's ever done anything for the first time, I'll tell you, this is my own personal experience, which can't in any way relate to running a professional football organization, which is just insane. The amount of attention to detail and being able to connect and to relate and to study things and to be on top of everything. I think it's got to be one of the hardest jobs in America. But I mean, things you can't possibly know how to do until you do them. Be a parent. Holy crap, is that hard? And you
we're just talking about that.
Okay, number one. Number two, when I became a teacher, I was like, I know what I'm talking about. And then I'm there like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I think they know it. That's another thing. Being a boss, being in charge of people, it's hard in anything. First managerial job was managing a staff of 3, and I almost had a mutiny. I was like, oh, this is crazy. It's so hard to do these
being
things.
A beat reporter.
No, it's crazy. I'm sure, absolutely. You're there and you're like, I want to do everything, but there's only one of me. So no matter what you're doing, when you're in a position where you've got to make decisions and people are looking to you to figure that stuff out, it's really, really hard. So that experiencing thing, but that's how it works, right? Like, you take the philosophy and you take the mind and you recognize that there's going to be lumps along the way and you figure it out. And that's just how it works. Otherwise, there'd never be assistants elevated to head coaches. I like the idea of doing it. I mean, look, my leading candidate based off of nothing is like a Ben Johnson candidate, because I want that new wave of thinking. I want the taste of the McDaniels and the McVay, thing that's going on, where they're, as innovative as Bill Belichick was in everything that he did, particularly defense. You see which way the league has moved. I want an unproven assistant with a crazy offensive brain to be one of the people who's considered here. So I'm not going to discount Mayo just for the lack of experience, but it is a really, really hard thing. So I understand why, Dakota or, reports might have been like, not sure if they're ready. You're not sure if anybody is ready, right? You're not sure if anybody, when Brandon Staley jumped into the job, everyone's like, this was a great hire and this guy's going to be awesome. A lot of people, and no, it wasn't. You see it go a lot of ways. You never know how it's going to turn out until you're, he
went from being a press conference darling and saying all the right things to getting snippy with reporters, and it's like, whoa, this guy is starting to lose it a little bit.
No, it's true though. I mean, it's the Tyson quote. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It's challenging. So whoever comes in, is going to have their work cut out for them for sure. Want to give a shout out to Jimmy Toscano, who's apparently just waking up and has entered the chat in there, from the Garden Report, but also a guy who's covered the Patriots for a bit. Jimmy and I were out in Arizona for the Seattle Super Bowl, which I'm still going to contend, and I was at 28-3 also. And obviously you have the first one, the single greatest game pound for pound Super Bowl that the Patriots played in. And that's factoring in a 28-3 comeback and 2 last-second field goals. I still am putting that Seattle Super Bowl as the best played Super Bowl I've ever seen in my life, with an ending that I don't think people still give enough credit to. You're flipping win probability by 99% in one play. It's the single greatest play in a championship game of all time. And that's, it's still going
And
to.
people act like it was a fluke. There was like, oh, Pete Carroll made a bad decision. It was literally a play they specifically practiced, knowing. Also, as a football nerd, I'm telling you, you almost never see that play get intercepted. It literally is either you catch it or it bounces off or gets batted down. It was insane.
Malcolm got lit up in practice over and over and over again. He couldn't get over on it. They couldn't get there. And obviously, you're going to give who was the Seattle Legion of Boom guy, the safety? Jesus, I'm blanking with a B. Who blew up the play?
Brandon
Browner.
Yeah, he blew up the stack. Yeah.
If he doesn't blow that up in such an amazing manner, Malcolm might not be able to slip through and make the pick. But and again, we might have to add this to your top 10 list. Two of my favorite words in Patriots history is Malcolm go. Because they knew it.
Yeah.
As soon as it got to that down, and they said, here it is. We're doing. They knew Taylor and Malcolm go, and he flies out there. Oh my goodness gracious! Best thing I've ever seen.
It killed me not having that
Malcolm,
on the list. It really did. That was tough. Brian Flores. 3 quarters, 3. Malcolm go.
Oh my God, gives me chills. That was fanboy sort of stuff. That was pretty amazing. Guys, we're gonna wrap it up. This is the beginning of our coverage and not the end. We already have a couple of written pieces out on CLNS Media. We're gonna be at the press conference. We're gonna try to bring it to you live or turn it around for you as quickly as possible, depending on the setup over there. So you can check that out. Then Taylor's gonna have a bunch of stuff and stand-ups throughout the day. You can guarantee on Patriots Press Pass there will be a bunch of bunch of podcasts, breaking news podcasts, possibly some more live stuff, as all of our fleet of Patriots contributors are going to have their say about what is an incredibly historic and I think sad day, a sad day, where, it is the end of an era, the ending of things, even if they needed to end. You're always going to look back on what it was, and what it was unbelievable and special. And as Taylor had pointed out, the reason he became a sports fan, the reason he does what he does, it's probably defined a lot of your identities. As people and fans out there in the chat, your entire personality and all of your life choices honestly might have been shaped by the level of sports fan. Being a Patriots fan through the 2000s has made you. So I really do think it's a profound impact on all of our lives in such a positive way that you're going to have to kind of take that back seat, take a step back and celebrate what this is and recognize how special it was. We do get caught up a little bit in he can't draft and have the torches at the door about this and that. But now that it's done, you're right. The feeling is a little bit weird. What happens next is going to be super interesting. Franchise in a place it hasn't been in a long time, which is at the bottom, needing a lot of everything with an extremely high draft pick, and things are going to be totally different coming back here. So again, like I said, a lot of remembrance, but also a lot of it's going to be the next few decisions. You're not going to know if they're right or wrong for a really long time, and everyone's going to have an opinion, but every single thing that happens from this moment forward, Taylor, is going to be really interesting. Every single thing. And I'll tell you this, we're all wrong. Everything we think we want, we have no idea. I'll say my first of a zillion bad takes in history, and I've had a zillion of them, but my first and worst was Bledsoe over Brady. I wanted Bledsoe to get his job back. It is what it is. That the camp was remarkably split back then. I don't know if people recognize or remember it. When Brady got hurt in the AFC title game, AFC title game, Bledsoe came in and helped them win it. A lot of people wanted him to start the Super Bowl. So what you want, is not always what necessarily needs to happen. But I do think there is a general level of agreement among people who either hated Bill all along or loved him that this is probably the right decision for the franchise.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
It had to happen at some point. Again, Bill's own philosophy: you move on a year early than a year late. And at the end of the day, that really is what this is. Is you can disagree that. I mean, everybody I think agrees that Bill is still a good head coach, but you know, and it also reports came out from ESPN that they parted ways. It was mutual and it was respectful, and that it was a healthy divorce. So I mean, you got to be happy with that. At least both sides got to go out on relatively their own terms.
Yeah, and again, as Bill would say famously, with everything, you said the year early rather than a year late, and also just the way it goes with the Patriots organization is we're on to blank. Whatever is on to next is now the most important thing, and there's a lot of important decisions to be made. So we'll see as the day comes on, and I'll let you guys know as well. We will do our best to try and immediately react to any significant Patriots news, but not necessarily every single rumor that's out there. So if there's something definitive on the coaching search, we'll jump back up here live as soon as we're able to assemble. But in the meantime, Taylor's got to hit. He's got to
big day.
He's got to head out to Gillette and see what happens. So again, they're talking together. I'm curious what side of Bill we see. This is one of the most interesting press conferences I think ever. The all-timers post Deflategate, post Aaron Hernandez, and right now, what type of tone is he going to strike? Was it really? Is he annoyed? Is he mad? Did he not want this? Did he get it too? Is he going to be reflective? Is he going to be open? Is he going to be combative? Is he going to own up to some stuff? Is he going to admit to any mistakes? Is he going to show a human side? Is he going to let his hair down, so to speak? I'm really, really curious to see.
Was a mistake.
Huh?
Doing my bump, Nikhil Harry was a mistake.
Yeah, right. No, and he's not gonna look. Here's a reason why Bill Belichick can't be more forthright. Before we go, when you're both the GM and the player and the coach, you can't shit on guys and then go out there and coach them. So you can't.
Right.
He could never admit to what he was doing poorly, because if he said like, "Yeah, my bad. Here's my GM hand. I did bad," and then the coach would be like, "Shut up! I got to coach these guys."
What are you doing?
Yeah,
leave me alone.
Right, exactly. So it's hard to do, and I don't think he's gonna bury anybody. But I am curious whether he just kind of, for the first time, maybe ever, just you get to see a side of Bill that you don't see, because he's unencumbered by having to hide information from you or engage in any sort of subterfuge and this and that. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, thank you guys again for watching. Keep it here. Give us, I don't like to do this often, but give us likes, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, turn on your notifications. You'll be notified when new videos and pop up and when we go live. Tell your friends. Excellent source for all things Patriots, with, as we said, kind of a fleet of Patriots contributors that include, in no particular order, Greg Bedard, Nick Cattles, Andrew Callahan from the Herald, Mike Giardi, Alex Barth, Brian Hines. We've got some of the best minds and the best voices on the beat, and obviously Taylor with what he brings you, and all of their contacts and all of their sources and all of their guests who are going to be coming in and out of these channels over the next who knows how long, until we kind of settle through this period and figure out where they're going to go. And then a ton of things to talk about after that as well.
And I do have some fun guests, hopefully this week, but next week we got a stack cast, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you joining us in here. Jimmy, you can go back to bed, little guy. I know you're all tuckered out. 8 a.m. was just a little too early for you. The boomer to be can't handle when he has to do a Celtics post-game show and then get up early, but he'll get there at some point. But anyway, thank you guys for watching again. We will see you, I guaranteed, at some point later on today. Take care.